Bihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari. Yashoda Nandana Braja Janaranjana. Yashoda Nandana Braja Janaranjana. Jamuna Tira Vanachari. Jamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari. Yashoda Nandana Braja Janaranjana. Yashoda Nandana Braja Janaranjana. Jamuna Tira Vanachari. Jamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Kunja Bihari. Jayom Vishnupad Paramhamsa Parivrajacharya Ashtotara Shata Shri Srimad. His Divine Grace Abhay Charitamrita Bhakti Vedanta Goswami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Anantakota Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. ISKCON Guru Vrinda Ki Jai. Prem Sikaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinath Shyamakunda Kunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhan ki jai. Shri Vrindavan Dham ki jai. Shri Navadvip Mayapur Dham ki jai. Shri Jagannath Puri Dham ki jai. Nu Govardhan Dham ki jai. Ganga Maya ki jai. Yamuna Maya ki jai. Tulsi Devi ki jai. Bhakti Devi ki jai. Samaveda Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Prihat Mridanga Srila Prabhupada's Transcendental Book Distribution ki jai. Shri Harinam Sankirtan ki jai. Nitai Gaur Premanande Hari Hari Bol. All glories to the assembled devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories to the assembled devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories to the assembled devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories to the divine lotus feet of Shri Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga. Maha Mahotsava Transcendental Appearance Day of Lord Shri Balaram ki jai. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. So what is our timing based on?
Well, we have to end by like 8:25.
8:25. Sure, of course, yeah. Okay, so everything completed by 8:25. Okay, thank you. All right. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So, Hare Krishna, welcome everyone. Hare Krishna. Lord Balaram's appearance day. We're very fortunate. Once a year we get to celebrate his appearance. And I was thinking we'll first read a little bit about sort of tattva, like who Balaram is, and then we'll go into some of the nectarian pastimes that should have, Prabhupada has given us in Krishna book, a summary study of the 10th canto, and a little bit from Nectar Devotion. So we'll try that. See if I got everything, sorry. Lord Balaram is, so amazing. We're fortunate we have Jagannath, Baladev, and Subhadra here. And, we get to engage in their service, their Ratha Yatra, so many things. And, sometimes one of the things we're going to be reading, it mentions his servitor Godhead, like that. So he's the Lord, but he's, even Lord Balaram, the first expansion of Lord Krishna, also has that mood of a servant, and this is amazing, and of course we see this in his appearances, Lord Lakshman, Lord Balaram, Lord Nityananda, like that. Although he's the Supreme Lord, he always has that mood, Of course we see there's always, the personality's always there, so we know when he appeared as Lord Lakshman, next time around he didn't want to be the younger brother again, because that mood of service, it was almost intolerable for him in instances where he felt he could have served his Lord, but because of having to abide by his Lord's, sense of decorum, that he was unable to, do things like drop people dead on the spot when they offended Lord Ram, So then he appeared as Lord Balaram, as the elder brother, and also Lord Nityananda in that sense. So, it's very wonderful. Haribol. So we'll start in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. There's a nice section where Srila Krishna Das Kaviraj is glorifying Lord Nityananda, and in the context of that, he's kind of really showing us, according to Tattva, who Lord Nityananda is, who Lord Balaram is, like that. So I thought that was a good place to start. So for anybody that wants to follow along, actually took some notes because it's quite a section, but part of it is a 12-page purport by Srila Prabhupada, where he's refuting Shripad Shankaracharya's, it's quite an interesting section, because Shripad Shankaracharya, you have this Lord Balaram, and then you have the quadruple expansion in the spiritual world, and then you have the quadruple expansion in the material world, and So one of Lord Balaram's expansions is Mahavishnu, in whom all the jivas are invested, and at the time of creation, through his glance, they come out like that, they go back into him. So sometimes he's referred to as jiva. So from what I could get from this 12-page purport, Sripad Shankaracharya and his followers, Mayavadis, they try to imply, and this is generally what we hear about the impersonalist school of thought, Mayavadi anyway, they have this concept that when the Supreme Lord comes, like as an incarnation, he assumes a form in the material mode of goodness, like that. So and this goes along with their theory that we're all God, and we're here in the material world, but when we realize our Godhood, then we become that again. So anyway, there's a wonderful purport we're going to read some of, but it's too long to read all of. But Srila Prabhupada, quoting extensively from Rupa Goswami's Laghu Bhagavatamrita, is refuting this. But it's interesting. You don't realize, these things are there, but because of the classical Indian schools of philosophy, these are very, very important, points. So anyhow, we're going to start in the Adi Lila of the Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, 5th chapter. We're going to read a few verses starting with verse 4 that begin to give us a glimpse of who Lord Balaram is. The easy ones I might hazard. Sarva avatari Krishna Swayam Bhagavan Tanhara Dvitiya Deha Shri Balaram. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, is the fountainhead of all incarnations. Lord Balaram is his second body. Srila Prabhupada's purport. Hare Krishna Maharaj. Lord Shri Krishna, the absolute personality of Godhead, is the primeval Lord, the original form of Godhead, and his first expansion is Shri Balaram. The personality of Godhead can expand himself in innumerable forms. The forms that have unlimited potency are called swamsha, and forms that have limited potencies, the living entities, are called vibhinamsha. Eka Iswarupa Donhe Bina Matrakai Ajya Kavya Vyuha Krishna Lilara Sahaya. They are both one and the same identity. They differ only in form. He is the first bodily expansion of Krishna, and he assists in Lord Krishna's transcendental pastimes. Purport. Balaram is a swamsha, expansion of the Lord, and therefore there is no difference in potency between Krishna and Balaram. The only difference is in their bodily structure. As the first expansion of Godhead, Balaram is the chief deity among the first quadruple forms, and he is the foremost assistant of Sri Krishna in his transcendental activities. So this is starting to, explain who Balaram is. And I think the first point is that he, Balaram, especially wants to assist Lord Krishna in his pastimes, right? Like we see this in Vrindavan. And then Balaram expands into the quadruple expansions. In other words, the whole spiritual world is being maintained by Balaram and his expansions. And then the second quadruple, the whole material world. So all these things are going on because Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Supreme Enjoyer. And Krishna's business is enjoying with his devotees, right? So this is what Krishna is really, invested in. This is what Krishna wants to do. And Balaram, he's assisting Krishna personally in his pastimes, and then he's making different expansions to make sure everything's going on in the spiritual world, everything's going on in the material world, so that Krishna can enjoy. And then personally, Balaram is helping Krishna in his transcendental pastimes with his devotees. So, Se Krishna Navadvipe Sri Chaitanya Chandra, Se Balarama Sange Sri Nityananda. That original Lord Krishna appeared in Navadvip as Lord Chaitanya, and Balaram appeared with him as Lord Nityananda. Okay, I think it's getting a little longer on the verses, so I'll just go to the translation. May Sri Nityananda Ram be the object of my constant remembrance. Shankarshan, Sheshanag, and the Vishnus who lie on the Karana ocean, Garbha ocean, and ocean of milk are his plenary portions and the portions of his plenary portions. Lord Balaram is the original Sankarshan. He assumes 5 other forms to serve Lord Krishna. He himself helps in the pastimes of Lord Krishna, and he does the work of creation in 4 other forms. He executes the orders of Lord Krishna in the work of creation, and in the form of Lord Shesha, he serves Krishna in various ways. So this is very nice, all these different forms that Lord Balaram expands, both to personally serve Lord Krishna, to carry out the creation, and then he expands as Lord Shesha to personally serve, which is such a sweet position. I remember some years ago, Janavi and I were visiting, and I was sitting on a cushion leaning up against the wall, and Dravida Prabhu kindly corrected me, because we understand that these forms of Lord Shesha, this temple room floor, these walls, these temples, all of these items that are being offered in the worship of the Lord Shesha is assuming everything needed for the worship of his worshipful Lord Sri Krishna, right? So in every way, Lord Balaram is getting everything covered so that the Lord's pastimes and the Lord's devotional service by the devotees, everything can just be perfectly done. Srila Prabhupada's purport. According to expert opinion, Balaram, as the chief of the original quadruple forms, is also the original Sankarshan. Balaram, the first expansion of Krishna, expands himself in 5 forms. 1. Maha Sankarshan. 2. Karanab Dishai. 3. Garbhadakshayi. 4. Shiradakshai, and 5. Shesha. These 5 plenary portions are responsible for both the spiritual and material cosmic manifestations. In these 5 forms, Lord Balaram assists Lord Krishna in his activities. The first 4 of these forms are responsible for the cosmic manifestations, whereas Shesha is responsible for personal service to the Lord. Shesha is called Ananta, or unlimited, because he assists the personality of Godhead in his unlimited expansions by performing an unlimited variety of services. Sri Balaram is the servitor Godhead, who serves Lord Krishna in all affairs of existence and knowledge. Lord Nityananda Prabhu, who is the same servitor Godhead, Balaram, performs the same service to Lord Gauranga by constant association. In all the forms, he tastes the transcendental bliss of serving Krishna. That same Balaram is Lord Nityananda, the companion of Lord Gaurasundara. Right? So, this is some description of Lord Balaram, especially in his role as servitor Godhead, how nicely he's doing all this. I was just thinking of an example, and when we try to use examples of things that we have experience of in the material world, they're never really adequate, but at the same time we get some sense of it. And Srila Prabhupada and our acharyas would use so many examples to illustrate points. And I was remembering not too long ago, in one of the classes we were hearing how Rupa and Sanatan, they were kind of pressed into the service of the Nawab Hussain Shah to run his empire, right? And they were so expert that he wanted them, so much so that when Sanatan tried to retire, he threw him in jail so he'd be there when he got back. But why did the Nawab, why was he so determined to press them into his service? Because he had other things he wanted to do. He had a big empire, but he wanted to go conquer other countries. He wanted to do this and that, right? But he needed, for him to do what he wanted to do, everything had to go on. He had a big empire. And of course, he's not Krishna, obviously. But he had the expert assistance of Dabir Kas and Sakar Malik, who became Rupa and Sanatan Goswamis. So similarly, Lord Krishna, he's the supreme enjoyer, and Balaram is just taking all of these forms just to completely facilitate it so that Krishna doesn't have to think about all the details, but everything is going on perfectly. So we're going to skip ahead a little bit, and anybody who's reading along, we're going up to verses 40 through 48 And then we're going to read a little bit from Prabhupada's 12-page purport that elaborates a little more, which is in that section. Okay, so going up to verse 40. Okay, let's see here. Text 40. In that spiritual sky, on the four sides of Narayan, are the second expansions of the quadruple expansions of Dwarka. Right? So we know, like in Dwarka, and even when Krishna manifests Dwarka on earth, right? He's there, Balaram's there, Pradyumna's there as Krishna's son, Aniruddha's there. So these are these expansions. And we're going to come back to a longer purport. Vasudeva, Sankarshan, Pradyumna, and Aniruddha constitute this second quadruple. They are purely transcendental. And Srila Prabhupada's 12-page purport. Sorry, a second here. Thus, there, the personal feature of Balaram, called Maha Sankarshan, is the shelter of the spiritual energy. He is the primary cause, the cause of all causes. So he's also the shelter of the spiritual energy. One variety of the pastimes of the spiritual energy is described as pure goodness, Vishuddha Sattva. It comprises all the abodes of Vaikuntha. Like that. So Balaram is the shelter of all the spiritual abodes. The six attributes are all spiritual. Know for certain that they are all manifestations of the opulence of Sankarshan. There is one marginal potency known as the Jiva. Maha Sankarshan is the shelter of all Jivas. Sankarshan is the original shelter of the Purusha, from whom this world is created and in whom it is dissolved. So Balaram's expansion, Sankarshan, is the shelter of Mahavishnu, right? From whom all these worlds have come and in whom they're all dissolved cyclically. He, Sankarshan, is the shelter of everything. He is wonderful in every respect, and his opulences are infinite. Even Ananta cannot describe his glory. That Sankarshan, who is transcendental pure goodness, is a partial expansion of Nityananda Balaram. So, Hare Krishna. We're getting some glimpse here of the amazing services and personalities, expansions of Lord Balaram. So we're going to go to Srila Prabhupada's purport and just read a couple sections that give a little more description. And then we'll go to Lord Balaram's pastimes. Let's see. Okay, so this is, as I mentioned earlier, Srila Prabhupada is refuting Shankaracharya's attempt to show that when Lord Balaram's expansions come to the material world, that they are within the modes of nature, like that. And so, we are on page 407. Sorry, this purport? No, this is Chaitanya Charitamrita. I'm sorry, it's verse 41 is where the purport begins. And we are on page 407, purport. So, Shankaracharya also says that the devotees who follow the Pancharatra state that God's qualities and God himself, as the owner of the qualities, are the same. But how can the Bhagavat school state that the six opulences, wisdom, wealth, strength, fame, beauty, and renunciation, are identical with Lord Vasudeva? This is impossible. In his Lagu Bhagavatamrita, verses 80 through 83, Srila Rupa Goswami has refuted the charges directed against the devotees by Sripad Shankaracharya regarding their explanation of the quadruple forms Vasudeva, Sankarshan, Pradyumna, and Aniruddha. He says that these four expansions of Narayan are present in the spiritual sky, where they are famous as Mahavasta. Among them, Vasudeva is worshipped within the heart by meditation, because he is the predominating deity of the heart, as explained in Srimad Bhagavatam 4.3.23. Sankarshan, as the second expansion, is Vasudev's personal expansion for pastimes, and since he is the reservoir of all living entities, he is sometimes called Jiva. The beauty of Sankarshan is more than that of innumerable full moons, radiating light beams. He is worshipable as the principle of ego. He has invested in Antadev with all the potencies of sustenance. For the dissolution of the creation, he also exhibits himself as the supersoul in Rudra, irreligiosity, Ahi, the snake, Antaka, death, and the demons. Pradyumna, the third manifestation, appears from Sankarshan. Those who are especially intelligent worship this Pradyumna expansion of Sankarshan as the principle of the intelligence. The goddess of fortune always chants the glories of Pradyumna in the place known as Ilavritta Varsha, and she always serves him with great devotion. His complexion appears sometimes golden and sometimes bluish, like new monsoon clouds in the sky. He is the origin of the creation of the material world, and he has invested his creative principle in Cupid. It is by his direction only that all men and demigods and other living entities function with energy for regeneration. Aniruddha, the fourth of the quadruple expansions, is worshipped by great sages and psychologists as the principle of the mind. His complexion is similar to the bluish hue of a blue cloud. He engages in the maintenance of the cosmic manifestation and is the supersoul of Dharma, the deity of religiosity, Manu, the progenitor of mankind, and the Devatas, demigods. The Moksha Dharma Vedic scriptures indicates that Pradyumna is the deity of the total mind, whereas Aniruddha is the deity of the total ego. But previous statements regarding the quadruple forms are confirmed in the Pancharatra Tantras in all respects. Anyway, I won't read all of this, obviously, but this is giving some glimpse of these different expansions of Lord Balaram and how they make it possible for everything to go on in the ways it needs to. And we're going to read briefly also the same purport a few pages later on page 412. And let's see here. So this is kind of a distinguishing here. In commenting on the 42nd verse of the Vedanta Sutra, Sripad Shankaracharya has claimed that Sankarshan is Jiva, the ordinary living entity, but there is no evidence in any Vedic scripture that devotees of the Lord have ever said that Sankarshan is an ordinary living entity. He is an infallible plenary expansion of the Supreme Personality of Godhead in the Vishnu category, and he is beyond the creation of material nature. He is the original source of the living entities. The Upanishads declare, Nitcho Nitchanam Chaitanas Chaitananam. He is the supreme living entity among all the living entities. Therefore, he is Vibhu Chaitanya, the greatest. He is directly the cause of the cosmic manifestation and the infinitesimal living beings. He is the infinite living entity, and ordinary living entities are infinitesimal. Therefore, he is never to be considered an ordinary living being, for that would be against the conclusion of the authorized scriptures. The living entities are also beyond the limitations of birth and death. This is the version of the Vedas, and it is accepted by those who follow scriptural injunctions and who have actually descended in the disciplic succession. Okay, let me just check the clock there too, timings. Okay, so one last reference from this purport, if you'll bear with me. Page 416. Okay. The original quadruple forms, Krishna, Baladev, Pradyumna, and Aniruddha, expand into another quadruple, which is present in the Vaikuntha planets of the spiritual sky. Therefore, the quadruple forms in the spiritual sky are the second manifestation of the original quadruple in Dwarka. As explained above, Vasudev, Sankarshan, Pradyumna, and Aniruddha are all changeless, transcendental plenary expansions of the Supreme Lord, who have no relation to the material modes. The Sankarshan form in the second quadruple is not only a representation of Balaram, but also the original cause of the causal ocean, where Karanadakshay Vishnu lies asleep, breathing out the seeds of innumerable universes. Right? So, anyway, this is, some details on Lord Balaram's portfolio, again, both in manifesting the spiritual world, maintaining it, and the material worlds. And Srila Prabhupada very painstakingly refutes the Mayavadi conceptions to make us think otherwise. So, anyway, that's a little bit about the tattva of Lord Balaram. And now I thought we could, read some of the Lila. I thought we could start with Dhenukasura. Right? There's a very nice intro there of Krishna and Balaram in Vrindavan, and then like that. So, if maybe we can take turns reading too, if there's other mics and things. Anybody would like to read a bit? Chapter 15, the killing of Dhenukasura. In this way, Sri Krishna, along with his elder brother Balaram, passed the childhood age known as Kumara, and stepped into the age of Pauganda, from the 6th year up to the 10th. At that time, all the cowherd men conferred and agreed to give those boys who had passed their 5th year charge of the cows in the pasturing ground. Given charge of the cows, Krishna and Balaram traversed Vrindavan, purifying the land with their lotus footprints. Right? That day that we celebrate Gopastami kind of ties into this, that when they were given this service, right? It's the day, well, here we see on Radhastami Radharani's lotus feet, but like in some places like Mayapur, you see on Gopastami, because when Krishna and Balaram were given charge of the cows, everyone was so excited, and all the Radharani, all the gopis were running out and in the cow pastures, and they were pulling up their sari a little bit because the pastures are muddied, by the cows and then, like that. So a very exciting event that now Krishna and Balaram are taking charge. They're going out into the cow pastures every day. Everybody was so excited. Accompanied by the cowherd boys and Balaram, Krishna brought forward the cows and played on his flute as he entered the forest of Vrindavan, which was full of flowers, vegetables, and pasturing grass. The Vrindavan forest was as sanctified as the clear mind of a devotee, and was full of bees, flowers, and fruits. There were chirping birds and clear water lakes, with waters that could relieve one of all fatigue. Sweet-smelling breezes blew always, refreshing the mind and body. Krishna, with his friends and Balaram, entered the forest, and seeing the favorable situation, desired to enjoy the atmosphere to the fullest extent. Krishna saw all the trees overflooded with fruits and fresh twigs. Overloaded with fruits and fresh twigs, bending down to touch the ground, as if welcoming him by touching his lotus feet. He was very much pleased by the behavior of the trees, fruits, and flowers, and he began to smile, realizing their desires. Would you like to read some?
Krishna then spoke to his elder brother Balaram as follows. My dear brother, you are superior to all of us, and your lotus feet are worshipped by the demigods. Just see how these trees, full with fruits and flowers, have bent down to worship your lotus feet. It appears that they are trying to get out of the darkness that has obliged them to accept the form of trees. Actually, the trees born in the land of Vrindavan are not ordinary living entities. Having held the impersonal point of view in their past lives, they have been put into this stationary condition of life. But now they have the opportunity of seeing you in Vrindavan, and they are praying for further advancement in spiritual life through your personal association. Generally, living entities in the mode of darkness obtain the bodies of trees. The impersonalist philosophers are in that darkness, but they eradicate it by taking full advantage of your presence. I think the drones that are buzzing all around you must have been your devotees in their past lives. They cannot leave your company, because no one can be a better, more affectionate master than you. You are the supreme and original personality of Godhead, and the drones are just trying to spread your glories by chanting at every moment. I think some of them must be great sages, devotees of your Lordship, and they are disguising themselves in the form of drones because they are unable to give up your company even for a moment. My dear brother, you are the supreme worshipable Godhead. Just see how the peacocks are dancing before you in great ecstasy. The deer, whose behavior is just like that of the gopis, are welcoming you with the same affection. And the cuckoos who are residing in this forest are welcoming you with their joyful, sweet cries because they consider that your appearance in their home is so auspicious. Even though they are trees and animals, these residents of Vrindavan are glorifying you. They are prepared to welcome you to the best of their ability, as is the practice of great souls in receiving another great soul at home. As for the land, it is so pious and fortunate because the footprints of your lotus feet are marking its body.
Where? It is quite natural for these Vrindavan inhabitants to thus receive a great personality like you. The herbs, creepers, and plants are also so fortunate to touch your lotus feet. And by your touching the twigs with your fingernails, these small plants are also made glorious. As for the hills and the rivers, they too are now glorious because you are glancing at them. Above all, the damsels of Raj, the gopis, are the most glorious because you embrace them with your strong arms, being attracted by their beauty. In this way, Lord Krishna and Balaram began to enjoy the residents of Vrindavan to their full satisfaction as they herded the calves and cows on the bank of the Yamuna. In some places, Krishna and Balaram were accompanied by their friends. The boys were singing, imitating the humming sound of the drones and accompanying Krishna and Balaram, who were garlanded with forest flowers. While walking, the boys sometimes imitated the quacking sound of the swans in the lakes, or, when they saw the peacocks dancing, they imitated them before Krishna. Krishna also moved his neck, imitating the dancing and making his friends laugh. The cows taken care of by Krishna had different names, and Krishna would call them with love. After hearing Krishna calling, the cows would immediately respond by mooing, and the boys would enjoy this exchange to their heart's content. They would all imitate the sound vibrations made by the different kinds of birds, especially the chikoras, peacocks, cuckoos, and ambardvajas. Sometimes, when they would see the weaker animal fleeing out of fear of the sounds of tigers and lions, the boys, along with Krishna and Balaram, would imitate the animals and run away with them. When they felt some fatigue, they would sit down, and Balaram would put his head on the lap of one of the boys just to take rest. And Krishna would immediately come and begin massaging the legs of Balaram. And sometimes Krishna would take a palm fan and fan the body of Balaram, causing a pleasing breeze to relieve him of his fatigue. Other boys would sometimes dance or sing while Balaram took rest. And sometimes they would wrestle amongst themselves or jump. When the boys were thus engaged, Krishna would immediately join them, and, catching their hands, they would enjoy their company and laugh and praise their activities. When Krishna would feel tired and fatigued, he would sometimes take shelter of the root of a big tree or the lap of a cowherd boy and lie down. When he would lie down with a boy or a root as his pillow, some of the boys would come and massage his legs, and some would fan his body with a fan made from leaves. Some of the more talented boys would sing in very sweet voices to please him. Thus, very soon his fatigue would go away. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, whose legs are tended by the goddess of fortune, shared himself with the cowherd boys as one of them, expanding his internal potency to appear exactly like a village boy. But despite his appearing just like a village boy, there are occasions when he proved himself to be the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Sometimes men pose themselves as the Supreme Personality of Godhead and cheat innocent people, but they can only cheat. They cannot exhibit the potency of God.
Bala, you want
While Krishna was thus engaged in his transcendental pastimes, exhibiting his internal potency in the company of the supermost fortunate cowherd boys, there occurred another chance for him to exhibit the superhuman powers of Godhead. His most intimate friends, Sri Dama, Subala, and Stoka Krishna, addressed Krishna and Balaram with great love and affection thus: Dear Balaram, you are very powerful. Your arms are very strong. Dear Krishna, you are very expert in killing all kinds of disturbing demons. Will you kindly note that just near this place there is a big forest with the name Talavan? This forest is full of palm trees, and all the trees are filled with fruits. Some have fallen down, and some are very ripe, even in the trees. It is a very nice place, but because of a great demon, Dhenukasura, it is very difficult to go there. No one could reach the trees to collect the fruits. Dear Krishna and Balaram, this demon is present there in the form of an ass, and he is surrounded by similar demon friends who have assumed the same shape. All of them are very strong, so it is very difficult to approach this place. Dear brothers, you are the only persons who can kill such demons. Other than you, no one can go there for fear of being killed. Not even animals go there, and no birds are living there. They have all left. One can only appreciate the sweet aroma that is coming from that place. It appears that up until now, no one has tasted the sweet fruits there, either on the tree or on the ground. Dear Krishna, to tell you frankly, we are very attracted by this sweet aroma. Dear Balaram, if you like, let us all go there and enjoy these fruits. The aroma of the fruits is now spread everywhere. Don't you smell it from here?
Back to me. Excuse me. 1 second. When Balaram and Krishna were thus petitioned by their intimate friends, they were inclined to please them, and with smiling faces they proceeded toward the forest, surrounded by all their friends. Immediately upon entering the Talavan, Balaram began to yank the trees with his arms, exhibiting the strength of an elephant. Because of this jerking, all the ripe fruits fell down on the ground. Upon hearing the sound of the falling fruits, the demon Dhenukasura, who was living there in the forest, who was living there in the form of an ass, approached with great force, shaking the whole field so that all the trees moved as if there were an earthquake. The demon appeared before Balaram and kicked his chest with his hind legs. At first, Balaram did not say anything, but with great anger, the demon kicked him again more vehemently. This time, Balaram immediately caught hold of the legs of the ass with one hand and, wheeling him around, threw him into the treetops. While he was being wheeled around by Balaram, the demon lost his life. Balaram threw the demon into the biggest palm tree about, and the demon's body was so heavy that the palm tree fell upon other trees, and several fell down. It appeared as if a great hurricane was passing through the forest, and all the trees were falling down one after another. This exhibition of extraordinary strength is not astonishing because Balaram is the personality of Godhead known as Ananta Sheshanag, who is holding all the planets on the hoods of his millions of heads. He maintains the whole cosmic manifestation exactly as horizontal and vertical threads hold the weaving of a cloth. After the demon had been thrown into the trees, all the friends and associates of Dhenukasura immediately assembled and attacked Balaram and Krishna with great force. They were determined to retaliate and avenge the death of their friend. But Krishna and Balaram caught each of the asses by the hind legs and exactly in the same way wheeled them around. Thus they killed all of them and threw them into the palm trees. Because of the dead bodies of the asses, there was a panoramic scene. It appeared as if clouds of various colors were assembled in the trees. Hearing of this great incident, the demigods from the higher planets showered flowers on Krishna and Balaram and beat their drums and offered devotional prayers.
A few days after the killing of Dhenukasura, people began to come into the Talavan forest to collect the fruits, and animals began to return without fear to feed on the nice grasses growing there. Just by chanting or hearing these transcendental activities and pastimes of the brothers Krishna and Balaram, one can amass pious activities. When Krishna and Balaram entered the village of Vrindavan along with their friends, they played their flutes, and the boys praised their uncommon activities in the forest. Their faces were decorated with tilak and smeared with the dust raised by the cows, and Krishna's head was decorated with the peacock feather. Both he and Balaram played their flutes, and the young gopis were joyous to see Krishna returning home. All the gopis in Vrindavan remained very morose on account of Krishna's absence. All day they were thinking of Krishna in the forest, or of him herding cows in the pasture. When they saw Krishna returning, all their anxieties were immediately relieved, and they began to look at his face the way drones hover over the honey of the lotus flower. When Krishna entered the village, the young gopis smiled and laughed. Krishna, while playing the flute, enjoyed the beautiful smiling faces of the gopis. Then Krishna and Balaram were immediately received by their affectionate mothers, Yashoda and Rohini, who, according to the time's demands, began to fulfill the desires of their affectionate sons. Simultaneously, the mothers rendered service and bestowed benediction upon their transcendental sons. They took care of their children by bathing them and dressing them very nicely. Krishna was dressed in yellowish garments, and Balaram was dressed in bluish garments, and they were given all sorts of ornaments and flower garlands. Being relieved of the fatigue of their day's work in the pasturing ground, they looked refreshed and very beautiful. Should I just finish?
Sure.
They were given palatable dishes by their mothers, and they pleasantly ate everything. After eating, they were seated nicely on clean bedding, and the mothers began to sing various songs of their activities. As soon as they lay down on the bedding, they very quickly fell fast asleep. In this way, Krishna and Balaram used to enjoy Vrindavan life as cowherd boys. Sometimes Krishna used to go with his boyfriends and Balaram, and sometimes he used to go alone with his friends to the bank of the Yamuna and tend the cows. Gradually the summer season arrived, and one day, while in the field, the boys and cows became very thirsty and began to drink the water of the Yamuna. The river, however, had been made poisonous by the venom of the great serpent known as Kaliya. Because the water was so poisonous, the boys and cows became visibly affected immediately after drinking. They suddenly fell down on the ground, apparently dead. Then Krishna, who is the life of all that lives, simply cast his merciful glance upon them, and all the boys and cows regained consciousness and began to look at one another with great astonishment. They could understand that by drinking the water of the Yamuna, they had died, and that the merciful glance of Krishna had restored their lives. Thus they appreciated the mystic power of Krishna, who is known as Yogeshwara, the master of all mystic yogis. Thus ends the Bhaktivedanta purport of the 15th chapter of Krishna, the killing of Dhenukasura.
So we don't have so much time, but I was going to read another section. And one thing I was noticing in trying to do a little studying about Lord Balaram, and it seems that, he really doesn't like false pride. And because a lot of these pastimes, like the Ramaharshan Sutta, when he, with his kusha weapon, and when the Kurus got a little full of themselves, and, at the time of Lakshmana and Samba's wedding, and Balaram, tried to go there and work it out so there wouldn't be a fight, and they became very puffed up, and then he, when they got to the point of saying that Krishna was not, qualified to use the royal insignia, it was kind of like the last straw it's described. He was getting angrier and angrier and angrier, so then they stomped off back to their city, and all of a sudden there was an earthquake. Balaram just stuck his plow in there and started pulling the whole city towards the river, so... Yeah, that's the one we're going to read now, yeah. So just, there was a kind of a thread there. So as His Holiness Bhadra Maharaj was mentioning, when Krishna married Rukmini, as we know, there wasn't a real, Rukmini wasn't so happy about it. He wanted to give her to Shishupal, and, kind of interesting too, because, Balaram was calming Krishna down, no, he's our brother-in-law, I'll take care of him, like he was... Rukmini was, a brand new bride, and she was concerned about her brother, of course, and she was in love with her Krishna, of course, and Balaram could sense all the, nuances of the situation. So he's, telling Krishna, no, he's our brother-in-law, we're family. Later on, though, Rukmini went a little too far, and so we're going to read about that. It's in the genealogy of the family of Krishna. Because of the time, I'm just going to kind of dive into the middle of it where it gets into this. So. Rukmini was a veritable enemy of Krishna, but he had great affection for his sister, so, to please her in all respects. So in this account, when Rukmini's grandson Aniruddha was to be married, Rukmini offered his granddaughter Rochana to Aniruddha. Such a marriage between immediate cousins is not very much sanctioned by the Vedic culture, but in order to please Rukmini, Rukmi offered his daughter and granddaughter to the son and the grandson of Krishna, respectively. In this way, when the negotiation of the marriage of Aniruddha with Rochana was complete, a big marriage party accompanied Aniruddha and started from Dwarka. They traveled until they reached Bojakata, which Rukmi had colonized after his sister had been kidnapped by Krishna. This marriage party was led by the grandfather, namely Lord Krishna, accompanied by Lord Balaram, and it included Krishna's first wife, Rukmini, his son Pradyumna, Jambavati's son Samba, and many other relatives and family members. They reached the town of Bojakata, and the marriage ceremony was peacefully performed. The king of Kalinga was a friend of Rukmi's and gave him the ill advice to play chess with Balaram, and thus defeat him in a bet. Among Kshatriya kings, gambling on chess was not uncommon. If someone challenged a Kshatriya to play on the chessboard, the Kshatriya could not refuse the challenge. Sri Balaramaji was not a very expert chess player, and this was known to the king of Kalinga. So Rukmi was advised to retaliate against the family members of Krishna by challenging Balaram to play chess. Although not an expert chess player, Sri Balaramaji was very enthusiastic in sporting activities. He accepted Rukmi's challenge and sat down to play. Betting was with gold coins, and Balaram first of all challenged with 100 coins, then 1,000 coins, then 10,000 coins. Each time Balaram lost, and Rukmi was victorious. Sri Balaram's losing the game was an opportunity for the king of Kalinga to criticize Krishna and Balaram. Thus, the king of Kalinga was talking jokingly while purposefully showing his teeth to Balaram. Because Balaram was the loser in the game, he was a little intolerant of these sarcastic, joking words and became somewhat agitated. Rukmi again challenged Balaram and made a bet of 100,000 gold coins. But fortunately, this time Balaram won. Nonetheless, out of cunningness, Rukmi claimed that Balaram was the loser and that he himself had won. Because of this lie, Balaramaji became most angry with Rukmi. His agitation was so sudden and great that it appeared like a tidal wave in the ocean on a full moon day. Balaram's eyes are naturally reddish, and when he became agitated and angry, his eyes became more reddish. This time he challenged and made a bet of 100 million gold coins. 100 million coins. Again, Balaram was the winner according to the rules of chess, but Rukmi again cunningly claimed that he had won. Rukmi appealed to the princes present, and he especially mentioned the name of the king of Kalinga. During the dispute, there was a voice from the sky, and it announced that for all honest purposes, Balaram was the actual winner of this game, that he was being abused, and that the statement of Rukmi that he had won was absolutely false. In spite of this divine voice, Rukmi insisted that Balaram had lost, and by his persistence, it appeared that he had death upon his head. Falsely puffed up by the ill advice of his friend, he did not give much importance to the oracle, and he began to criticize Balaramji. He said, "My dear Balaramji, you two brothers, cowherd boys only, may be very expert in tending cows, but how can you be expert in playing chess or shooting arrows on the battlefield? These arts are well known only to the princely order." Hearing this kind of pinching talk by Rukmi, and hearing the loud laughter of all the other princes present there, Lord Balaram became as agitated as burning cinders. He immediately took up his club in his hand and, without further talk, struck Rukmi on the head. From that one blow, Rukmi fell down immediately and was dead and gone. Thus Rukmi was killed by Balaram on that auspicious occasion of Aniruddha's marriage. These things are not very uncommon in Kshatriya society. Are we out of time? Can we move on to the king of Kalinga? The king of Kalinga, afraid that he would be the next one, that he would be the next one attacked, fled from the scene. Before he could escape even a few steps, however, Balaramji immediately captured him. And because the king had always shown his teeth while criticizing Balaram and Krishna, Balaram broke all the king's teeth with his club. The other princes supporting the king of Kalinga and Rukmi were also captured, and Balaram beat them with his club, breaking their legs and hands. They did not try to retaliate, but thought it wise to run away from the bloody scene. During this strife between Balaram and Rukmi, Lord Krishna did not utter a word, For he knew that if he supported Balaram, Rukmini would be unhappy, and if he said that the killing of Rukmini was unjust, then Balaram would be unhappy. Therefore, Lord Krishna was silent on the death of his brother-in-law Rukmini and on the occasion of his grandson's marriage. He did not disturb his affectionate relationship with either Balaram or Rukmini. After this, the bride and bridegroom were ceremoniously seated on the chariot, and they started for Dwarka, accompanied by the bridegroom's party. The bridegroom's party was always protected by Lord Krishna, the killer of the Madhu demon. Thus they left Rukmini's kingdom, Bojagata, and happily started for Dwarka. Thus ends the Bhaktivedanta purports of the 61st chapter of Krishna, the genealogy of the family of Krishna. Shri Balaram Ji ki! Shri Krishna Balaram ki jai! Lord Jagannath Baladev Subhadra ki jai!